The blinding glare of headlights cut through the fog-drenched night as sirens wailed behind a sleek, black SUV rolling to a cautious stop. The driver, calm, composed, wearing a crisp tailored suit, slowly raised his hands. He didn't flinch. He didn't panic. He knew what this looked like. But what the officer didn't know was who he just pulled over. "Get out of the car! Hands where I can see 'em!" screamed the officer, gun drawn, veins bulging, sweat streaking down his brow. A second officer emerged from the cruiser, flashlight trembling in his grip, aiming straight for the driver's chest. The man didn't speak. He didn't argue. He just waited. His badge, tucked securely in his inner jacket pocket, would have cleared everything in seconds. But he didn't reach for it. Because he knew better. He was Director Jordan Miles, the highest-ranking black man in the FBI, and in that moment, he was just another suspect with dark skin in the wrong neighborhood. If this moment pulled you in, smash that like button, because what happens next will leave you speechless. Subscribe now for more cinematic, true-life stories of courage and justice. Share this video with someone who needs to see how quickly power can shift. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? When did you join the Black Tails family? Be part of this global community, because the truth doesn't speak unless we amplify it. 2 days earlier, Director Jordan Miles had just wrapped a classified intelligence briefing at Quantico. After months investigating deep corruption within law enforcement task forces across several states, he was preparing to go public, quietly but firmly, through internal channels. He didn't like showdowns. He didn't need applause. Jordan Miles believed in silent integrity, and he was days away from exposing a syndicate of officers trading favors for protection and planting evidence to keep themselves untouchable. He'd grown up in Baton Rouge, the son of a civil rights attorney and a schoolteacher. By 35, he had cracked the cartel infiltration case in the Southwest. By 40, he was the youngest deputy director in FBI history. Now, at 46, he was leading reform from the inside. That night, he was driving back from a closed-door strategy session in Arlington. No escort. No motorcade. Just him and his mission. Until he took a wrong exit. It was a quiet suburban block. Wide streets, trimmed hedges, mostly residential. But Director Miles didn't notice the patrol car lurking behind the billboard at the intersection. He didn't think twice about driving 10 miles under the limit. He didn't think the tinted windows would be a problem. He never imagined that a routine drive home would turn into a moment that would change lives. At 9:23 p.m., the patrol lights ignited. At 9:24 p.m., Jordan pulled over. At 9:25 p.m., 2 officers approached, one from each side, weapons drawn. The lead officer, Corporal Dennis Cole, had a history. 5 excessive force complaints, 2 settled quietly, none resulting in disciplinary action. He barked commands, made assumptions, ignored protocol. He claimed the vehicle was suspected stolen, based on a vague description that didn't match the plate. His voice shook with adrenaline, but his grip on the gun was steady. Jordan Miles did exactly what he'd trained others to do in high-pressure standoffs. Stay calm. Stay visible. Comply. De-escalate. But something about his silence, his composure, only made the officers more hostile. "You think you're better than me?" Cole hissed. "Get on your knees." Jordan calmly replied, "I'm a federal officer. My badge is inside my jacket. I'm reaching for it." "No, you're not." Jordan froze. That moment, frozen in time, could have gone either way. A wrong move. A flinch. A second of fear. But Jordan waited. And waited. Then, headlights bathed the scene in soft amber. A black sedan pulled over. A woman stepped out, petite, brown-skinned, authoritative. Special Agent Maya Reynolds, his senior aide. She had been trailing behind by a few minutes after a phone call delayed her. Now, her presence cracked the entire situation open. "Officers," she shouted. "Stand down immediately." Both guns swung toward her, and just as quickly were lowered, because she held up her credentials like a blazing torch. "Director Miles is a federal officer. You are holding him at gunpoint unlawfully." Cole sputtered. His partner took a step back. Jordan finally stood. He didn't yell. He didn't threaten. He simply looked Cole in the eye and said, "I want your badge number. And your commanding officer's name." Cole's lips twitched. But the shift had already begun. By 10:03 p.m., body cam footage had been uploaded to the FBI's internal review system. By midnight, the incident was escalated to the Department of Justice. The next morning, the footage went public, not because Jordan released it, but because someone else inside the bureau had seen enough. Cable news exploded. Hashtag director held at gunpoint. Hashtag not above the law. Hashtag power in the wrong hands. Cole was suspended, then arrested on obstruction, false reporting, and endangerment of a federal officer. His partner testified. Internal affairs moved swiftly. But it wasn't just about one arrest. This incident became a flashpoint, a reminder that in America, status does not always protect you from suspicion if your skin is the wrong shade. 3 days later, Director Miles stood at a press podium. Not for revenge. Not for glory. But because the silence was louder than ever. "I'm not the story," he said, voice steady. "This is not about me. It's about every young man who didn't have a badge in his pocket. It's about reform, accountability, and a culture that has to change, from the inside." He paused. "And it starts with the truth." The message came through a backdoor channel, one only known to top-level intelligence. Encrypted. Traced to a server that no longer existed. The sender's ID was ghosted, wiped clean. Jordan stared at the screen, the words burning into his memory. His fingers hovered above the keys. Then he picked up the phone and made one call. Activate Echo Protocol. Echo was a covert internal task force, created to investigate corruption inside federal agencies that couldn't be handled publicly. Only 3 people knew of its existence. And Jordan had just lit the match. Special Agent Maya Reynolds, who had intervened the night of the stop, was the first to join him. "Sir, you think this wasn't just bad policing?" Jordan nodded. Cole's file was tampered with. His record scrubbed clean, until we looked deeper. A former Marine. Dishonorably discharged. Recruited into a private contractor group linked to Black Ops. Then mysteriously rehired as a patrol officer. Someone wanted Cole in place. Someone wanted this to happen. Maya dug deeper, into records, surveillance, radio logs. That's when she found it. A police dispatch note, time-stamped before the stop, referencing a suspicious black male in a black SUV fitting Jordan's vehicle. Except, that call never came from a civilian. It came from inside the department. Maya traced the source to a hidden communication thread, a private, off-the-books police chat group calling themselves the Blue Network. The group operated across multiple jurisdictions, a shadow society of officers who believed the law didn't apply to them. They shared targets, coordinated stops, celebrated when body cams malfunctioned. And Jordan Miles? He'd been flagged weeks earlier. Why? Because of the case he was about to expose, a massive sting operation tied to stolen weapons, planted narcotics, and money laundering, all involving law enforcement officials on the take. Jordan wasn't just investigating corruption. He was inches away from dismantling an empire. The traffic stop wasn't a coincidence. It was Plan A. If Cole had pulled the trigger that night, it would have been ruled a tragic misunderstanding. The director's badge would have been found too late. The system would have mourned, shrugged, and moved on. But Jordan lived. And now, they were panicking. Inside FBI headquarters, Agent Henry Kessler watched the media storm from his office with gritted teeth. Kessler had been Jordan's second-in-command for nearly 2 years, loyal, polished, and secretly compromised. He was the leak. He'd been feeding intel to the Blue Network for months, sabotaging investigations just enough to delay without detection. But Jordan had suspected him. So he set a trap. Maya sent a decoy file to Kessler's terminal, a falsified list of informants Jordan was allegedly planning to expose. Within 3 hours, that list was forwarded to the very same encrypted channel that delivered the warning to Jordan. Caught red-handed. Echo moved fast. By midnight, Kessler was in custody. But the confession he gave stunned everyone. "It wasn't just us," Kessler said, eyes bloodshot. "It was bigger. Higher." He described a covert alliance, Not just rogue cops, but politicians, defense contractors, and even former federal agents. They were united by one goal: control. Control over investigations. Control over public perception. Control over who got to speak, and who got silenced. And Jordan Miles, he had become the face of exposure. They wanted a martyr, Kessler said. A message. Stay in your lane. You weren't supposed to walk away. Jordan sat in silence as he listened. This wasn't just about one stop, one officer, or one department. This was about the soul of the system. Jordan now faced an impossible choice. He could go public, release everything, burn the entire conspiracy down in a blaze of media fire. But that risked hundreds of lives, undercover agents, innocent officers, whistleblowers who were still feeding Echo quiet intel. He could work from within, quietly, strategically, dismantling the Blue Network one cell at a time, even if it meant no one ever knew the full truth. Maya pressed him. Sir, the people deserve to know. Jordan met her eyes. They will, but not through chaos, through precision. He turned to his desk, opened a locked drawer, and pulled out a USB drive labeled simply, Black Light. It held every name, every payment, every shred of evidence Echo had gathered. Enough to bury careers. Enough to start a war. He handed it to Maya. Start with D.C. Then Atlanta. Then L.A. After Agent Kessler confessed in Part 2, Jordan knew the rot went deeper than anyone had dared to believe. The Blue Network wasn't just coordinating racial profiling and targeting whistleblowers. It was a strategic operation, a shadow faction embedded in law enforcement, politics, even intelligence. Its mission: control narratives, silence dissent, and most dangerously, infiltrate federal power from the inside out. Jordan had initiated Echo Protocol to hunt them. But someone inside Echo had betrayed him. Emergency generators buzzed to life. Jordan's office flooded with dim red backup lighting. Maya stepped toward the exit. And stopped. A silhouette stood outside the glass. Motionless. Unmarked uniform. No ID. Weapon drawn. Stand down, she yelled. The figure raised its gun, not at her, but at the keypad. Pop. The access panel shorted out in a single, silent flash. Glass shattered. 4 masked men swept in with military precision, but they weren't FBI. They were private contractors. And they weren't there to talk. Jordan moved fast, grabbing the encrypted black light drive from his desk and sliding it into a hidden wrist slot sewn into his jacket. Maya fired first, dropping one intruder. Jordan ducked behind a filing cabinet, counting seconds between shots, calculating exits. In the chaos, one masked attacker grabbed Jordan by the collar and slammed him against the glass board, cracking it with his shoulder. You should have stayed in your lane, Director. Jordan's eyes locked on the insignia on the attacker's glove. A blue falcon. Proof. Confirmation. The Blue Network had made its move. Jordan and Maya activated the only remaining option, Protocol Z, a secret exit-built post, 9/11 for top-level evacuations. It led to an old elevator shaft, guarded by biometric ID and a pressure seal. But they only had 20 seconds before the attackers rerouted. As they entered the shaft, Jordan tapped his wristband, sending a silent, coded signal to one person only. Z1 breach. Deliver package. The package was the black light drive. And the delivery wasn't digital. It was personal. An unmarked SUV sat in a dusty alley behind the Justice Department. Inside, a man in his 60s adjusted a hearing aid and checked his watch. His name was Ray Holloway, a former intelligence operative turned off-grid fixer. He hadn't been seen in 12 years, not since he faked his own death after exposing corruption in Homeland Security. But when Jordan activated Protocol Z, Ray came back to life. He'd been waiting for the call. The moment the signal hit, Ray started the engine. Destination: the Hill. Back at Echo HQ, Jordan and Maya reached the surface level only to find more agents waiting. But these weren't Blue Network. They were FBI Internal Affairs, led by Deputy Director Evelyn Stark. I need your badge, Jordan, she said coldly. Maya raised her gun. Stand down, director is under threat. Exactly why he's being placed under protective custody. Jordan stepped forward. You got a warrant? No, Evelyn said with a smile. I've got orders. And then she showed it. A presidential directive. Signed that morning. The directive suspended Director Jordan Miles from duty effective immediately. Grounds: compromise of national security procedures and potential obstruction of internal investigations. Jordan's breath caught. This wasn't just about infiltration. This was about removing him before he could expose everything. But he stayed calm. I understand, he said. You're doing your job. Maya's eyes flared in disbelief. You're just letting them. Trust me, he whispered. Because he knew something they didn't. The black light package was already en route to Congress. Ray Holloway parked across from the U.S. Capitol. He walked with a slight limp, a battered briefcase in hand, past tourists and lobbyists who never noticed the living legend in their midst. Inside the briefcase, the entire list. Every cop. Every contractor. Every official. He passed it to Senator Dana Reeves, head of the Senate Intelligence Committee, and one of Jordan's last true allies. Jordan trusted me with this, he said. Dana opened it. And froze. Names. Transactions. Operations. Surveillance tapes. Dear God, she whispered. This is a coup. Senator Dana Reeves stared at the evidence. Across from her, in a private chamber under the hill, sat Ray Holloway and two senior intelligence whistleblowers, one from the NSA, the other from Homeland. This isn't just a rogue unit, Dana whispered. It's a shadow government, Ray replied. They've infiltrated police forces, media, even your committee. But if we go public, They already know you have it, he cut in. They're coming. And they won't knock. A moment later, the building shook. Lights flickered. Power outage. In the White House Situation Room, President Lancaster stared into a glass of bourbon. He looked tired. Older than he had just weeks before. Are the leaks contained? He asked his chief of staff. No, sir. 3 major outlets picked up the whistleblower drop. The public's already reacting. What about Miles? Still detained. But there's a problem. A private security feed from Fort Monroe was hacked. Someone has the footage of the traffic stop. The president's hand trembled. The video. The moment Miles had a gun pointed at his head by a rogue officer. Unarmed. Profiled. If that got out. Jordan sat in a high-security holding room, wrists chained, 2 guards outside. He leaned forward, whispering into a button sewn into his cuff. Now, Maya. Across town, Agent Maya Reynolds slipped into a darkened control room at Echo HQ. One swipe of her ID, and the entire building's servers lit up. She uploaded a single video file to every major platform simultaneously. Title: FBI Director Profiled at Gunpoint, the video they tried to erase. Within 5 minutes, it was trending on every social media feed in the country. It started slow, 1 view, then 1,000. Then came the comments. Then came the outrage. A black man. Unarmed. Standing outside a luxury SUV. Held at gunpoint. Hands raised. Humiliated. And he's the head of the FBI. The silence that followed was louder than any siren. TV anchors went off script. Senators scrambled. Protesters filled the streets, holding signs not just with Jordan's face, but their own. Because if he wasn't safe, what did that say about everyone else? While America reeled, Dana Reeves made her move. She walked into a live session of the Senate Judiciary Committee holding a sealed document. Mr. Chairman, she said, I invoke emergency disclosure authority. Flanked by 2 armed Capitol officers, she dropped the full list of Blue Network members onto the public record. It named 43 senior police officials, 9 judges, 4 sitting congressmen, 1 vice president's aide, and President Lancaster's own brother, General Royce Lancaster. The room exploded, and across the nation, the arrests began. In an undisclosed location, General Royce stood in front of a wall of monitors, eyes burning with fury. He went nuclear, he said to a shadowy figure beside him. "And now?" the figure asked. "Now we hit back. No more chess. We're playing fire." He activated a dormant command chain, something only a few military officers even knew existed. Operation Cinderblock. A last-ditch cyber attack meant to wipe evidence, blackmail lawmakers, and ignite enough chaos to force a national security reset. The goal? Martial law. Still in custody, Jordan sat calmly as agents scrambled around him. "You leaked classified video," one barked. "You undermined national security," said another. He smiled softly. "I protected it." That's when the lights flickered again. Then went red. Echo HQ went into lockdown. Suddenly, every screen in the room played a single message. "The people have seen. The voices have spoken. Any attempt to erase this data will trigger a global release." It was a dead man's switch. Jordan's insurance policy. And finally, the man who started it all. Officer Darren Kuhn. The one who pulled Jordan over. The one who drew his gun. The one who smirked as he made the most powerful black man in federal law enforcement stand in the rain like a criminal. He was arrested on live television. Not just for misconduct, but for conspiracy, falsifying records, extortion, and connection to an organized domestic threat group. His badge was stripped. His pension revoked. And in a single moment, the line between untouchable and accountable was rewritten. 3 weeks later, Jordan Miles stood before a joint session of Congress, not as FBI director, but as a citizen. He wore no uniform, no title, only a dark suit and a quiet strength. "I was profiled by a man who thought his badge made him untouchable," he began. "But this isn't just about me. It's about the thousands of people who don't have cameras, or backup, or networks." He paused, scanning the crowd. "If you think I'm the exception, you've missed the point." After Officer Kuhn's arrest, the country convulsed. News cycles couldn't keep up. Major cities declared emergency town halls. The footage of Jordan, hands raised, silent in the rain, became the most replayed video in the world. But beneath the headlines, a quieter, more dangerous storm brewed. Because Echo, the shadow faction exposed by the Blue Network files, wasn't dead. Not yet. On a chilly morning in October, just before dawn, Agent Maya Reynolds intercepted a digital signature on the FBI's mainframe. Someone inside the bureau had tried to delete the original blacklight evidence. It wasn't a mistake. It was a coordinated cyberstrike, led by General Royce Lancaster, the president's brother. His motive? To burn every trail leading to the Oval Office. Jordan, despite being reinstated privately, had one final mission. And this time, it was personal. Miles arranged a secret meeting inside a decommissioned NSA cryptography chamber. Only a handful of people knew of its existence. Inside sat Agent Maya Reynolds, Senator Dana Reeves, Ray Holloway, 2 former Echo members who flipped for immunity. They had 1 hour to make a choice. "We release everything," Jordan said. "Names, locations, operations, even the executive orders they buried." Ray hesitated. That could ignite global chaos. Jordan didn't blink. "I'd rather face a storm above ground than live beneath silence again." They did it. All of it. On November 4th, at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, over 700 pages of unredacted files were released to international media and human rights groups. The Internet exploded. Echo operatives from 6 countries were arrested. High-ranking officials from 3 presidential administrations were subpoenaed. 4 U.S. generals resigned within 48 hours. And most shockingly, the president resigned. Not with fanfare, not with dignity, but in a quiet, emergency press release, citing health concerns. The truth. Jordan Miles brought the house down. Behind prison glass, former officer Darren Kuhn finally agreed to an interview. "What were you thinking that day?" the journalist asked. Kuhn leaned in. That he was just another black guy with a fancy car. That I'd get a commendation for catching someone suspicious. "And when you found out who he was?" Kuhn swallowed. "I knew I was done. And I deserved it. But why pull the gun?" He paused. Because the badge made me feel untouchable. The camera cut to black. So did the badge. And so we returned to the Capitol steps. Jordan adjusted the mic, looked out at the crowd. He wasn't wearing a uniform. Just a dark, clean suit and a lapel pin that read, "Voice Silence." He began. 6 months ago, I was held at gunpoint by someone who was supposed to protect me. But that wasn't the crime. The real crime is how normal that was. To him. How normal it's been, for far too many. The crowd was dead silent. They told me I should have complied. That I should have explained myself. I was the director of the FBI. If I had to explain why I existed safely in public, then what does that mean for the rest of us? He raised his hand slowly. I'm not here to ask for reform. I'm here to demand rebuild. From the ashes. From the truth. From the courage of those who've been unseen for too long. The crowd roared. Not in rage, but in unity. Over the next few weeks, police departments nationwide initiated a truth audit program, named after Miles. Officer bodycam laws were overhauled. A federal initiative known as Project 456, a civilian oversight platform, launched with over 2 million users. And one unexpected ripple. A 10-year-old boy from Atlanta, the same one who shook Jordan's hand at the end of Part 4, was interviewed on live TV. He held up a sign. He stood tall. So I will. That moment became a mural in 17 cities. It wasn't just a story anymore. It was a movement. Late one night, Jordan sat on his porch, alone, sipping tea under the stars. His phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. They're regrouping. There's more coming. Be ready. Jordan closed the message. Locked the phone. He knew this wasn't the end. Just a pause between storms. He looked at the night sky and whispered, "Let them come. This time, the world's watching." Like this story if you stood with Jordan from the start. Subscribe if you believe real power comes from truth, not titles. Share this with someone who believes in rebuilding what's broken. Drop a comment. What does courage look like in your world? Because justice doesn't end with punishment. It begins with a voice. And now, it's your turn to speak.